Hello students, this video tutorial is meant to teach you how to write a summary. Knowing what a good summary looks like is one thing, but actually writing one is a whole different game. So what you might want to have out is your copy of Against School by John Gatto, because I'm going to be walking through this a little bit. So we talked about what the criteria for a good summary are and what the typical elements are. Now let's look at how do we actually write one. So the first thing you need to do is read a lot. I would suggest not trying to sit down and write a summary until you've at least previewed the text, meaning given it a quick skim, maybe 6 minutes or so, 6-minute skim. And then after doing that, you should annotate it completely. We talked about annotating in the Expert Reading Strategies video tutorial, and you should have annotated the article from beginning to end. It doesn't mean you have a complete understanding of it yet, but you've at least engaged with it and read it actively from beginning to end. Once you've done that, then you're ready to start breaking it down into a summary. So I'll start by saying step-by-step instructions for this appear on Allen and Bacon, pages 113 to 116. And I'm going to give a sort of overview of what they cover there and model it for you a little bit so you can have an idea of a good way to go about this. So the best way to start with a summary, because it has to be a complete summary from beginning to end, is to write what is called a gist statement. So the strategy is to write a gist statement for every paragraph of the article. And that's your first step. What is a gist statement? It's basically a short sentence or brief fragment that captures, well, the gist of the paragraph. What is the main idea here? Remember, you're focusing on main ideas, not minor details or supporting examples or things like that. So let me show you what a few of these gist statements look like. This is our article and the first paragraph here. I taught for 30 years in some of the worst schools in Manhattan and in some of the best, and during that time I became an expert in boredom. Boredom was everywhere in my world, and if you asked the kids, as I often did, why they felt so bored, they always gave the same answers. They said the work was stupid, that it made no sense, that they already knew it. They said they wanted to be doing something real, not just sitting around. They said teachers didn't seem to know much about their subjects and clearly weren't interested in learning more. And the kids were right. Their teachers were every bit as bored as they were. So, if I want to write a gist statement for this paragraph, I want to think, what is the big idea that all these details, all these words are trying to convey? It's not anything about, Gatto teaching for 30 years. That's just a minor bit about him. It's not just about the fact that the kids were bored, right? It's not just about the fact that the kids wanted to be doing something real, right? We have to read the paragraph as a whole and try to capture what is the gist of this paragraph, what is the main idea. And so the gist for this paragraph would be that school is boring for students and teachers. And I put "and" in capital letters because I think what John Gatto is trying to emphasize in this paragraph is that not just students are bored. A lot of people would agree that school is boring for students, but that the teachers were bored as well. Okay, so another example. The second paragraph. Boredom is the common condition of school teachers, and anyone who has spent time in a teacher's lounge can vouch for the low energy, the whining, the dispirited attitudes to be found there. When asked why they felt bored, the teachers tend to blame the kids, as you might expect. Who wouldn't get bored teaching students who are rude and interested only in grades? If even that. Of course, teachers are themselves products of the same 12-year compulsory school programs that so thoroughly bore their students. And as school personnel, they are trapped inside structures even more rigid than those imposed upon the children. Who then is to blame? So in this paragraph, I think the gist of what Gatto is trying to get at is that he's trying to talk about why our teachers bored. He just told us that teachers are bored. Here he's talking to us about why they are bored. So the gist of why they are bored is basically that the system perpetuates itself in a cycle of boredom. So he's saying that teachers are bored because they were students in the same system, and when they were students, their teachers were boring, and when their teachers were students, they were bored by their teachers, and so on and so forth. So Gatto is trying to say here that it's just ingrained in the system. Okay, so that is those are just statements for paragraphs 1 and paragraphs 2. What I want you to do now is pause this video, and when you do, spend some time writing your own gist statements for paragraphs 3, paragraphs 4, and paragraphs 5. So spend some time practicing it on your own, and then when you come back and press play again, I'll offer you my own gist statements. So go ahead, pause now, and try it out. Paragraphs 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so let's talk about these paragraphs. Let's see how you did. Paragraph 3, this one right here, when he talks about his grandfather, you may have gotten confused and fooled by this whole anecdote about his grandfather. That is not the main idea. The point Gatto is trying to make is that boredom is natural in school. It's supposed to be that way. So he says school is supposed to be boring. Right? That it is just ingrained in the system. That is the natural system. Okay, paragraph 4. Don't get confused by his Star Wars references, right? Or this big long anecdote about him getting fired and his leave getting taken away in this conspiracy against him. What is the real point he's trying to get at is right here where Gatto is talking about that we could change the system easily and inexpensively. Right? So the gist of paragraph 4 is if we wanted to, we could change the system. And I'm going to even quote him here because in my summary, remember, it's okay to have some quotes, easily and inexpensively. And just for safe note keeping, I'll keep track of the page that's on. So that quote is on page 34. Right there, easily and inexpensively. Okay, that's the main point he's trying to make in that paragraph. And in paragraph 5, the last paragraph of Gatto's introduction, here he's basically revealing his thesis. He does it in the form of a question when he says, could it be that our own schools are designed to make sure not one of them ever really grows up? So he's saying that the fact that schools are so boring is not an accident. He's saying we haven't changed the system. Even though we could, we haven't changed the system because it isn't broken. It is purposefully designed to hinder our children. That is Gatto's big argument that he's going to try to spend the rest of the essay proving. Okay, so here we have gist statements for the first 5 paragraphs of Gatto's article, which are basically his introduction. He sets all the background, shows you what the problem is, and then gets into his thesis statement down here. The next step, when you're writing a summary, is to try to start to combine some of these gist statements. So ideally you would go through the entire article and write a gist statement for the rest of it. I've helped you through 5 of them, but you've got to do the rest on your own. Once you've got them all done, then you can start looking at them and trying to chunk them together. So the idea with this is to see which of these can be grouped together, because you couldn't include every single one of these in your final summary or it would be too long. So you have to think, how can we lump some of these together? And so I'll take a crack at it. I'll start by lumping paragraphs 1 and 2 together, and what I'll come up with is that Gatto claims that school is just as boring for teachers as it is for students, because they are just perpetuating, I always have trouble spelling this word, perpetuating the cycle of boredom. That they went through. So that captures the gist of paragraphs 1 and 2, and it even hints a little bit at paragraph 3. Now to try to chunk the rest of this together for paragraph 4 and 5, and even a little bit of paragraph 3. Paragraph 3 is kind of a transition paragraph, so it sort of hints at both of these. We'll write another sentence. So here's where Gatto is talking about how easily we could change the system, but we haven't changed it, and why. So I'll put a little transition word in here. Furthermore, Gatto argues that even though we could change the system, and here I'll still use my quote, easily and inexpensively, the page number, we haven't, because it is doing exactly what it was designed to do. Hinder our children. And so now I've got 2 sentences that sum up the first 5 paragraphs of Gatto's article. Right now, if we highlight these, we can see that those are about 60 words long, right? So this might be too long, it might not. We won't know until we actually go and do the rest of our gist statements and try to put our whole summary together. But this is a good start. So your next step is to write gist statements for all of the paragraphs in Gatto's article. Try to lump them together in some short, concise sentences like we just did here, and then you'll be on your way to a rough draft of a summary of the article that includes all of the main ideas. From there, you have to look back at the criteria for a good summary and look at the typical elements of a good summary and modify, revise your rough draft until it sounds good, looks good, it's accurate, objective, complete and concise, and all those other things. And that will conclude our video tutorial on writing a summary.